So welcome everybody to our final session in our College and Career Pathways Conference. My name is Anita Gonzalez, and I am the Deputy Director for the New Mexico MESA program. Here with us today, we have Mr. Roel Piseño from the Princeton Review. He's going to give us all information you need to know about the SAT and the SAT and our brief time together. So a couple of housekeeping as we get started is during the session, please feel free to use your mic to interact with our presenter as needed. Go ahead and take yourself off of mute. Or if you're unable to use the mute button, please go ahead and utilize the chat function. So we'll go ahead and be checking those. Also, at the end of the session, make sure that you complete the attendance survey, which will give us important feedback, but it will also mark your attendance for participating today. So with that, I'll go ahead and sit back and I'll pass it on over. You want to take it away?
Right. Thank you, Anita. And can you hear me okay?
Yes, your volume is fine.
All right, wonderful. Well, let me start by saying thank you to you and to everyone for the time tonight. I know it's late in the evening on a Friday night, so thank you for joining us for this awesome event. This is my first time to present, to attend, and I'm looking forward to doing this again, maybe in person, hopefully. My name is Roel Piseño, and I am based in San Antonio, Texas. I am Area Vice President for K through 12 programs in the central region of the United States for the Princeton Review and Tutor.com. And I have the pleasure of working with K-12 school districts and universities in the entire central United States. So I haven't been traveling that much, obviously, in the last year and a half, but in normal circumstances, I would be traveling probably 50% of the time in that area. So I'm really happy to be able to join you guys this evening. As Anita noted, please unmute yourselves if you have a question, if you have a comment. There are a couple of areas here on the slides as I continue here where I will ask you questions. So please, if you have a response, jump in and let me know if there's anything in the text chat also. Please feel free to use that if you're more comfortable doing it that way. But we'll go ahead and get started here. I always like to start with a story about the end in mind. And I know that you guys are all students in high school, I believe, and that your goals are all probably very different from, one from the other. But we always like to talk to students at the Princeton Review about keeping an eye on the end in mind or your goals, but never forgetting where you started. And so this picture that I have up on the screen is actually where I grew up. Obviously, this is after we had left the house. It's a little bit dilapidated, but lots of memories in this home. This is a home that I grew up in the area of West Texas, known as the Panhandle, or more specifically in the Lubbock area. I don't know if you all are familiar with that area, but it is very flat, as you can see. There are a lot of, in this picture you can't see, but the house was actually surrounded by cotton fields and fields of different types of grains and different types of even vegetables that this farmer who owned.
Roel, I hate to interrupt you, but are you able to up your volume? A couple of our
Yes.
attendees are saying that it's a little low. So
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to connect my, is that any better? Even if I do that?
that's much better, actually. That's much
Okay,
better.
I'll just keep them here. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Yep, so as I was saying, we like to talk about the end in mind, but we always like to tell students to never forget where you started, because that is always an important component of, your life journey, and really putting together sort of what we call a life map. So I always tell students, and I recommend to students that as you're getting involved in your different activities in high school, and as you start looking at what you want to do with the rest of your life, college, community college, if you want to start working on a career in some technical area, which we recommend, by the way, we always like to tell students to keep notes, take pictures, keep those things in boxes that remind you of certain events in your life that are benchmarks, that are certain turning points in your life that really kind of mean something, so that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, you have something to look back to in terms of how you formed yourself in your life and your experiences and your end goals. And so I like to show people this picture because although the house looks very dilapidated and old, some students sometimes tell me it looks like a haunted house, and it actually kind of was. We have a lot of stories about ghosts at the house, but my 5 brothers and I had 6. We were 6 in our family, all boys. We made a lot of memories at this house and around this house. We had farm animals, we had horses, we had pigs and bunny rabbits and all kinds of dogs that just kind of floated into the house from other places. We lived probably 5 miles from our next door neighbor, our closest neighbor. But the um, the reason I like to tell this story as well is also because um, the things that I learned growing up in this house and in this area of Texas taught me a lot about myself. You know, it was we weren't wealthy, we weren't rich, we didn't have air conditioning and those types of things. So we learned to improvise, we learned to problem solve, we learned to be creative with a lot of things, even with the foods that we ate. And as you guys can imagine, with 6 boys in the family, we ate quite a bit, and we weren't very friendly with each other when it came down to that. But we learned to, you know, cooperate. We learned to share and those types of things. So it was always, it's always a way to remind myself of where I started. So um, as we get into the presentation as well, the other thing I like to talk about is obviously, you know, keeping task, or I'm sorry, keeping notes of where you've been. And so obviously, I'm now located in San Antonio, Texas, which is a beautiful city. Been here for about 16 years. But you guys can see Lubbock is up in the northern part of the state. Um, and I've spent quite a bit of time between San Antonio and Houston, actually, and Dallas and Lubbock. So I lived in those 4 cities and ended up living here. Um, Next door neighbors, actually, to New Mexico, as you guys know. So I like to always start the presentation as well with just kind of a few questions about the SAT, especially. I know that in New Mexico, you guys just recently adopted the SAT as your high school exit exam. And so one of the first questions I like to ask, I've been at Princeton Review for about 20 years, and there's been a lot of change on this test, in this test, and how it's made up and everything about it each one of those years. And so does anybody want to guess? Does anybody want to share what you think SAT actually stands for? You think it's an acronym for something? Do the letters stand for something? Anybody want to guess? And you can type your answer into text chat if you prefer. I'll give you like a couple of seconds here. Anita, I don't know if we have anybody in the text chat.
Okay. We don't. Oh, standard
Really?
academic test. That came through. There was one. Standard
Okay,
academic
standard
test.
All right. So this test actually has been through a few changes, and it has been called standard academic test, standard achievement test. There's been everything under the moon that you could call these 3 letters has happened. But actually right now, as of today, as of actually several years ago, the College Board actually dropped the acronym SAT, and it's just SAT. It's an acronym in and of itself. It doesn't stand for anything anymore. There are no more words that make up the S, the A, and the T. And so it's a logo. The SAT is its own logo. And so what we like to tell people is that when you think of the SAT, these days, it doesn't really stand for anything. College Board, and I'll give you guys a little bit of information from the Princeton Review sort of standpoint. You know, we help prepare students to actually excel on this test, just like we do for the ACT as well. So for us, we like to give students a lot of information that's background information about College Board and how they score their tests, how they write their tests. Obviously, we created strategies that help students do better on the test. But when it comes to even things like how they named the test, they dropped the standard achievement and standard aptitude, all of those words, because they got a lot of criticism because especially in the early days, the SAT really wasn't meant to test your academic skills or your academic knowledge. The SAT got its origins actually as a way to determine which people actually who took the test would become military officers versus frontline military people. And so we like to tell people that story because that was the origin of the SAT. It was actually used for military purposes to determine if you scored well on this SAT, you probably were going to be assigned some sort of rank. You were going to be an officer. And if you didn't score so well, guess where you were going? You were going to the front line as a person holding a gun, as a military person holding a gun and fighting in the wars. And so that brings us back to recognizing that this is a logo. The SAT is just like, you guys probably know what this stands for if you go shopping, especially right now around this season. Target. Let me show you a few more, see if you can see what College Board is trying to do now with the SAT as well. McDonald's, Nike, of course, the swoosh. We've got Starbucks with their logo. And of course, probably the most famous one is Apple. So The SAT does not stand for anything aptitude or achievement anymore, although they have made some changes in the content of the test to make it more about aptitude or achievement. So we give them credit for that. So I like to tell students all the time, standardized testing matters. And why does it matter now? So for us, and especially for you as students, the changes that have happened over the last year and a half, 2 years because of COVID-19 have really set this up so that the SAT especially really matters now because of scholarships and financial aid, if nothing else. So as you guys probably know from what you're dealing with in New Mexico, just like everybody else in the country, a lot of schools, a lot of universities and colleges have elected to go either test optional or even test blind. And so we'll get into a little bit of that now, but the idea behind how colleges and universities now are treating the SAT and the ACT is that, you either are going to be required, 50%, if we can put it that way, to show some sort of score for some sort of admissions policy that colleges and universities are going to continue to mold differently from what it's been in the past, or they're just going to say, you know what, we don't need a test. We're going to look at your grades. We're going to look at other things. And so we'll get into the discussion about that in a minute. I also like to put a note here about AP courses. And I know probably several of you guys are taking AP courses, which is a great thing. If you're not, you should be, because it can actually get you college credit, as you probably already know. So when we talk about these words, test optional and test blind, those are very important terms right now. And you can see here on the screen. Test optional means that you can submit the score. Colleges and universities will consider it, but you don't have to. It's an option. They're a test optional school. You can submit it. And actually, if you scored well on the test, it's to your advantage that you submit it, because it's going to probably amount to some kind of amount of scholarships or financial aid. And so that's the positive about test optional right now, is that if nothing else, you're going to be considered for additional scholarship and financial aid money. The schools that tell you they're test blind, don't even worry about submitting a test score to them, because even if you submit it, they're not considering it for anything. But again, I just want to reemphasize to you guys, it is still important to take the SAT, obviously, because in your state, it's required to graduate for sure. But the reason that you want to try to score better as well is for additional scholarship and financial aid money. So I'll keep saying that over and over. The bottom line in terms of where you determine test optional versus test blind, at the end of the day for you will matter with what it says here at the bottom of the screen. The key is to check the specific college and universities that you are considering attending or applying to see what their specific policies are regarding test optional versus test blind. And then you can make your plans from there. So again, whether you're taking, whether the SAT is required or not, and a lot of my screens are going to reference the ACT as well. And I like to continue to show students the ACT as well for other reasons that I'll get to in a minute. But, whether they're considered or not, again, I'm going to just reemphasize scholarships, financial aid will always rely on something like a test score to differentiate students, if nothing else. And I'm going to tell you that something that's going to become more prevalent as we move forward beyond COVID into whatever is going to happen next. College Board and ACT are always competing with each other to make the next new change to the exam, or the changes to the exam that will affect you, ultimately, the student. So for us, a company that trains students to take tests better, taking a test is a skill that you can develop, a skill that you can learn. And we've proven it. We've been around for 40 years now. This is our 40th anniversary year. We have worked with millions of students to actually help them to get the scores that they want to get into the universities that they want. And so my job at the Princeton Review, as of about 20 years ago, has been to work with school districts and universities to set up programs where we can train students to reach the scores that they want to on these exams, so that they can get entrance or admissions into the college of their choice, and also to increase their chances for scholarships and financial aid. All right, next screen. So here's just a quick example. I always like to tell students that if you look at nothing else about your scores, when you're looking at specific universities, you can request information about what kind of merit awards they provide. based on SAT scores. This is something that's information that they keep, and they like to share the information, especially if you're a student of color. Students, female students in programs where there are not a lot of female students. It's always beneficial for colleges and universities to be able to share this because it's marketing for them. They want to attract a diverse population of students. They're going to share this information with you. So please always remember to ask that information. This information is also available many times on a university's website. So as you explore their websites, please look for this information. And again, relative to an SAT score, you can look right down the middle here. Texas Tech University is where I went to school in Lubbock. Great university. You can see that a 1200 on the SAT would get you about $2,000 a year of additional merit aid, which again, $2,000 doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it does make an impact for you, especially when you consider the amount of dollars we spend on books now. Textbooks for students are very expensive. But you can see here, there's just a few examples of schools, and we have a lot of this information as well. I'm happy to send a library set of books to you, Anita, and to your organization that you can keep there in the libraries and share with the students. And then beyond that, I would recommend to the students that they can register on our website for this kind of information. There's a lot of information, and I'll probably show you guys a little bit of this at the end so that you can see what it looks like. We don't really need to get into this slide, but I always like to talk to students about, which test is best for you. If you have an option, and if this becomes an option, this is a great sort of mentality to keep as you move forward. Some students will ask us, which test is better? We like to have this conversation because really the SAT versus the ACT is like Coke versus Pepsi. It's like Red Vines versus Twizzlers. It's like Marvel Comics versus DC Comics. They're different, right? The Takis versus the Cheetos and Hot Cheetos and Flaming Cheetos comparisons. Those are what my son likes to pursue. He's 15, so we're having this conversation a lot right now. He's a sophomore in high school. But for us, at the end of the day, everybody's different. You're not going to be necessarily wired for one test or the other. In your state, obviously, you guys have to prepare for the SAT, so it might be beneficial to you for you to look at it a little differently, obviously. But for us, it just really depends on you taking a practice test. So even if we just talk about the SAT, as you guys are pursuing a good score on the SAT, we always encourage you to take a practice test. And you don't have to pay for a practice test. We provide free practice tests. You can find free practice tests online. We're happy to send you paper and pencil versions. There are online versions of the SAT. One thing that I would note for you though is, or recommend for you actually, is that because the test is still paper pencil, please, if you take any practice tests with us or with anybody, please try to take it paper pencil as well. And because the experience that you have with a paper pencil test cannot be simulated online. It's something that you really kind of have to experience paper pencil just like you would the day of the test. So we always recommend that you do that. The test structure for the SAT did go through some changes recently as well, as recently as this summer. You guys may have heard about it because of the changes in your state. So normally there have been 4 sections on the SAT, as you can see on the screen: reading, writing and language, math, and then there was the essay. So College Board has gone back and forth with the essay being mandatory versus not mandatory versus optional. Last time that we checked, this past year, actually in 2020, it was optional. And as of this summer in 2021, they have removed the SAT altogether. So it's not even an option for you to take the essay with the SAT anymore. Now, I'll remind you that it could change again with College Board. Sometimes they make changes within a couple or 3 months, within 6 months, sometimes within a year. But the timing for their changes has increased within the time span of a few months. So I'd keep my eyes on that, especially if you have little brothers or sisters that will be coming up in the school systems later on. This will be something that we're keeping an eye on as well. But again, the thing that I would recommend to you, especially for students who are good writers, your essay writing ability sometimes will make, and especially for admissions in certain schools, and especially for scholarships and financial aid, if you think that you want to see if that essay will help you in any of those categories, then I'm going to recommend that you do take an ACT. And again, that would be outside of the scope of what you do for high school graduation because it's required that you take the SAT. But if you're looking at certain colleges and universities that will accept the ACT score, and you are a good writer, or it's something that you want to pursue for additional scholarship or financial aid or for admissions into some certain schools, colleges, universities, I would recommend that you do take the ACT. And if it's applicable, and I would work with your organization that you're working with for this evening's event, or your high school counselors can tell you that certain students will qualify for fee waivers. So it won't cost you anything to take these tests as well if you need to. Something to keep in mind. All right. So the structure of the test, and we'll get into some other stuff here in a minute, but I always like to let students know what is included in the test so that you're aware, especially for you guys as you prepare, because this is high school graduation as well. It does make a difference that you pay attention a little bit differently in your classes. The thing that we tell students, as well as what you're getting in your class for the SAT especially, is that you read more. Reading more complex text, reading books that are maybe a little bit higher level than what you're used to, maybe getting into some novels, some New York Times bestseller books. Reading at a higher level will get you better prepared for the SAT. That's the number one recommendation we make for students that involves not paying for a course that you have to prepare. If you pick up a book from your library, pick up a book from your community library, or maybe if you are into books, ebooks, that you do read more and read more often, and you challenge yourself with the level of reading that you're actually doing, and that will automatically help you on the SAT. So we like to tell students this right away as well. The SAT and the structure of the SAT is such that, and we'll get into this in a minute. Let me go to this other screen. So the SAT uses language, uses words to make a difference in the challenging levels of their questions. And so even if you're looking at a math section question on the SAT, a lot of times what they're doing is they're confusing students by using tricky language or SAT words that are a little bit tougher and words that normally students probably won't be using in their everyday language. So that's the reason that we recommend for students to read more and to read more rigorous writing that is something maybe a little bit higher level than what you would normally read. It's going to help you automatically. Let me backtrack a little bit. So the length of the SAT, you guys may be familiar with this already, so forgive me, we'll go through this quickly. So it's 3 hours without the essay. So the essay would have added a half hour. The section scores are 200 to 800 range. The perfect score is a 1600. The lowest score you can score on the SAT is a 400 by just signing your name and filling out those initial bubbles. You'll get a 400, but obviously we want you to do a lot better than that. So one of the things that we tell students is to take a practice test. And when you take a practice test, we ask students to think of the practice test in one of a few different ways. If it's your very first practice test, just take the test. Don't worry about it. Don't prep for it. Take it cold turkey and just take the test, finish the test, try to do the test in one sitting. One of the things that we recommend to students is if you request a practice test or if your school requests practice tests that are take-home tests, this is a very important point. Normally the test obviously is done within a classroom setting or a place where you're seated with other students taking it all during one sitting. So you take the entire 3-hour test at one time. If you guys experience some take-home testing where your school or a program gives you some practice tests to take home and do on your own, we're going to recommend to you that you work with an adult, with your mom or dad or an uncle, someone who is in your home, who is an adult, or another brother or sister who can help you to do the test in one sitting, even if you do it at home. Again, the importance here for us to tell to you is that you have to build the experience that you're getting from the SAT as if you were preparing for maybe, let's say, running a marathon or running a 100-meter dash. You have to prepare for that race just like you would for that race day event. Same thing applies with the SAT. So the difference is obviously it's a 3-hour exam. So the difference in taking a take-home exam that you take maybe one section right now, and then you go for the rest of the day with your cousins or go with your family to do an event that's family. Then you come back later on and take another section that's another 30 minutes. That's not the same experience that you're going to get on test day. So we want you to be as best prepared as you can. And obviously, if you're on our website, if you're asking us for questions, we have an 800 number you can call. Our advisors are always available to answer your questions. So please keep that in mind. We're like the good angel that you keep on your shoulder. We're always going to be your advocate. We're always going to give you the best information and most recent information about how you can do better, how you can prepare better for this test. So don't forget that. So the SAT, oh, I'm sorry, I've got the wrong screen up here. So I marked off the SAT instead of the ACT. This was for another ACT presentation, so forgive me. But obviously you can see the timing of the SAT, and actually we're talking about the essay, so it's not necessary. That's why I did that. Let me just go to the next screen. We talked about some fast facts here for the SAT. We talked about the tricky wording that they use. College Board is very known for doing this. And one of the things that we do with students is we help students to identify words that are plugged into passages to trick you. And so again, if you work with us, we'll point those out to you. But as you're reading through some of the SAT scores, we'll recommend that you sort of focus on the main idea, the main topic of anything you're reading that's on an SAT exam, and to try to pull out literally what's the subject, what's the verb, and what's the, if there's an object that's receiving the action. We try to give you that specific 1, 2, 3 punch so that you can pull out from a paragraph or a sentence exactly what you're trying to get just to answer the question, because they will try to confuse you. The SAT words are what we just call tough words or tough vocabulary words that you're not used to using. So one example that I share with students is the word catamaran. You know, if you grew up in the Lubbock area where I grew up, there's not a lot of water there. So it's a lot of very dry climate. We don't use boats very often there. There's a couple of lakes nearby, but you know, a lot of people don't have boats. A catamaran is it's a large boat, basically. But the word catamaran is not a word that I grew up using. So that would have been a word that would have confused me very easily on the SAT. So it's an example of sort of the type of words that you're going to hear, that you're going to see on the SAT, and that we want you to be forewarned about.
There's a question in the chat about
yes.
what would the reason be to take the essay?
The reason to take the essay would be if you're a good writer, it's going to be beneficial because you're probably going to shine, and that's going to be a way for you to distinguish yourself from students, and especially students who don't write the essay. So the other important piece is simply for financial aid and scholarship opportunities. A lot of times, colleges and universities who accept the ACT obviously will look at the essay, and the essay tells you a lot about a student. And obviously for admission purposes, that's important. The essay needs to be compelling, but it needs to be very much about the student, not fancy, not using big fancy words, but just it's a really quick way for colleges and universities to get a snapshot of the student. But again, ultimately, if for no other reason, that essay will help you to get additional scholarship and financial aid dollars. Okay? Any other questions, Anita? I'm sorry, I should ask while I'm paused here.
That's all that it was. So I'm trying to catch him and try to catch you at a good stopping point, but that was the only one that came through.
Okay. So, you know, one thing that I'll talk about here as well is one of the questions that we get a lot from students is, how many practice tests should I take? How many real tests should I take? And those are both really, really good questions. Those are questions that every student, and especially if you're a junior, those are questions you should be asking, probably at least when you're a sophomore, if not when you're a junior. So our recommendation really comes back to a couple of really simple facts. Number one, we don't recommend that you take a lot of any of the practice tests or the actual test. For the actual test, the main reason you don't want to take it a lot, 2 reasons. It costs money. It costs $53 to take every time, as you can see on the screen. So it's going to be expensive to take it more than one time. We're not saying don't take it more than once, but really kind of try to minimize how many times you take it. If you know the schools that you're trying to apply to, that's going to give you your second answer. So every school is going to have a range of SAT scores that they target for admissions. So if their target score is 1200 and up, so you want to try to target at least a 1200. The national average on the SAT is right at about 1000. Okay, so in New Mexico, I'm not familiar with what the average there. In Texas, the average I think is we're right at 900 something. So we're below the national average here. So what we tell students is, if you know that you're targeting a score of 1200 to get into Texas Tech University, for example, then you need to take a practice test. Take it blindly if you're taking it the first time. That's one practice test. Don't take the actual until you've taken at least one and probably 2 practice tests, because the first one is just to give you a benchmark. A benchmark just tells you, here's how I did with no prep, with no practice, just cold turkey, here's what I scored. I scored 1,000. So what's that going to tell you? You need to try to find 200 points on the SAT that will get you that 1,200 to get you into Texas Tech. So what does that mean for practice tests? Take one more practice test after you've prepared. What does preparation mean? A preparation for us means a number of things. Preparation means where can you get prep for free versus where can you get prep for pay. Obviously, we're going to point you to what you can get for free first, because ideally that's where you want to go so you don't have to pay for it. And obviously, if you have the opportunity to pay for prep, we provide the prep, you can pay for it. There are other programs that will provide you prep if you pay for it. But again, we're going to point you to, of course, we're going to point you to our website where you're going to get some free prep. There's a lot of good content on our website that will give you some really good strategic advantages to taking the test. So take the first practice test cold turkey, take a second one once you've identified, let's say, for example, you identify 1, 2, or 3 colleges or universities that you want to maybe target for applying to. If they are 1,200 at one school, 1,300 at another one, maybe 1,400 at another one, you're starting to get up in the score range. You're going to want to take at least one practice test and at least one other practice test after you have prepared yourself for that second one, okay? That second one is going to tell you then if you need to take yet another one, because as you get closer to that 1,200 or whatever that target test score is, then you're going to feel better about not taking any more tests. Once you've gotten to that target score of 1,200, then stop. We're going to recommend you not take any more, because you're probably going to, what we see happen with students when they take more than what they need is they actually go backwards in their score because they're over preparing. So that's one thing to remember about the SAT, is that it's not a perfect exam. It is not a test of your intelligence. It is not a test of how much or how well you know academic content. The SAT still, even with all the changes that College Board has implemented, the SAT is still more of a test about how you know strategies for solving problems and answering questions on that specific question. And so that's the difference. The SAT is not as much about curriculum and content that you cover in your classes as, for example, the ACT is. And so that's something that you guys need to remember as you're preparing for the SAT. Those are great questions. As far as how many times you take the actual test, again, it's going to depend on how many times you've taken. It's going to depend on when you got to your actual test target score with the practice tests you took. So let's say, for example, you scored a 900 on your first practice test. You're trying to get to 1,200. So you practice, you prepare, you practice, you prepare a little bit, let's say for 3-6 weeks, and then you take your next practice test and you score an 1,100. So you went up 200 points. All right, so you need to take one more practice test, but you still need to prepare a little bit more for that third practice test because you still haven't reached your target score of 1,200. So what we're going to recommend that you do is hopefully when you take your practice test, wherever you take it, hopefully you can get a score report. A score report is going to give you basically a breakdown of what you answered, which you answered correctly and which you answered incorrectly. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to focus on the scores that on the questions that you scored incorrectly, obviously, so that you can figure out where you can get 100 more points from. Does that make sense? Let me just say that one more time. We get a little bit surgical on looking at students' score reports because that's where you find where you need to get your additional points from. So if you scored a 900 the first time, you scored an 1100 on the second practice test, we're looking for 100 more points to get to that 1,200. We're going to look at your incorrect answers and try to figure out where we can find 100 more points. So where's the secret sauce to finding those 100 points? It makes sense when you look at those questions that are earlier in a section than later, because the questions on the SAT get more difficult as you go up in number. So number 1 on that math section is going to be easier than number 5. It's going to be easier than number 8. They're going to be easier than number 10. So you can see as you increase in number, as you get further into your questions, the questions get more difficult. So what you want to try to focus on is the incorrect answers that you had on those questions that are earlier in that test group. I hope that makes sense. Please chime in on the text chat or speak up if that doesn't make sense. That's something that you can carry forward with you as you prepare for the exam. It's going to help you. Okay?
No, I actually just have a question. On the screen right now, we're seeing that still that SAT and ACT comparison slide. Is that where we should be at in the presentation?
Yeah, that's fine. Let me go ahead
Okay.
and advance this, but thank you for asking. Is there any more about the SAT that anybody has questions about? I really want to make sure that we focus on answering those questions, and we can come back to them. When we get into the PSAT, this is where we get to have a little bit of fun. Because what I'm going to talk to you about now is the conversations we have with students that are very real. Why do we take the PSAT, first of all? Does it count towards college admissions? And if it doesn't, then why do we take it? Well, a lot of the answers to these questions that you see on the screen and that you guys are probably thinking of right now can only be answered by College Board. The PSAT has counted for many things in the past, but you guys may or may not be familiar. There was a program that used to be called Duke TIP, Duke Talent Identification Program, and there are others. Duke University, for example, would use an SAT or an ACT score to get you into their program, but it would then open up additional doors. The PSAT is a little bit like that. So let me describe what I mean by that. It doesn't count, as it says on the screen, it doesn't count for you towards college admission. It's really like a practice SAT. It is a shortened version of the SAT. We like to call it the little brother of the SAT. It's good to take because it does, if you do well on the PSAT, or whatever you do on the PSAT is going to give you a good indication of what you will eventually do on the SAT. But more importantly, for you, if you're juniors, the PSAT does count for you for consideration for national merit consideration. And so if you're a Hispanic student, if you're a Native American student, if you're a female student, there comes an opportunity for you, if you score well on the PSAT, to get recognized for national merit. And that just basically opens up doors for colleges and universities, as well as scholarships and financial aid for you because you scored well on the PSAT. And again, that's only a one-time shot as a junior. So it doesn't matter if you took it as a sophomore, or I know some schools, and especially here in Texas, I know it's very, very common for us to test 100% of our freshmen and even sophomores on the PSAT. It doesn't matter when you're a freshman. It doesn't matter when you're a sophomore. It doesn't count for anything. So we tell students, take it if your school offers it. Take it. Don't worry about it. It's really not going to make a difference for you. It only will make a difference for you when you're a junior. Just please remember that. So here's where it gets to be fun. And you guys, if you want to unmute, you can. If you don't want to, it's okay. But when I do this presentation in person, I like to tell students that the PSAT scoring is one of the most confusing aspects of test taking that I can remember about anything, SAT, PSAT, or any test related thing. It's just very confusing. So let me give you guys an idea. So normally what I would ask students to do is to repeat these next three things that I'm going to share with you. The first one would be, I'm going to ask you to say, I think I heard you say, and then I'm going to ask you to say, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to ask you to ask me, is that correct? And if I did this right, I'm going to answer, yes, that's correct. So let me just tell you guys what that means. It's a little bit strange. I know it's a little bit weird for you. You're probably thinking I'm crazy. It is later here in Texas, so I'll just say that that's part of it, but it's okay. So scoring for the PSAT is really kind of crazy when you look at it. And so if you look at the meme on the right here, it says one does not simply make sense, and it doesn't. Scoring, let me just read it, just like it says on the screen, the short version. I'm going to give you the short version. It's a range of 320 to 1520. It's calculated from two section scores of 160 to 760 for both math and evidence-based reading and writing. All right, so that sounds like a little bit of gibberish to me. And this is where I work. This is my world, test taking and scores and all of that. So let me give you the long version. The long version is there are multiple area, cross-test, and subscores. What does that even mean? I have no idea. The only ones to pay attention to, however, are the math test from 8 to 38 points, the reading test from 8 to 38 points, and the writing and language test from 8 to 38 points. If that doesn't mean anything to you right now, if that doesn't calculate in your brain, don't worry about it. It really means nothing to you. except that when you look at your scores, you have resources, you have companies to go to. You can come to Princeton Review. We will help you decipher that score, because it really is a little bit confusing how they actually score it, and they do it on purpose. There's a reason that they do it, and I won't go into detail, but because I'm with the Princeton Review, I like to tell students and the people who work with the students is that at the end of the day, College Board is collecting money. You're paying them to take this test, or your school district is paying them to take this test. So it's in their best interest that they don't show you how to score a perfect score on the SAT or the PSAT. That's why we're going to help you do that. We've been doing it for 40 years, and it does work. So we like to tell students, don't worry about the test. It's not it's not an indicator of your intelligence. It's not an indicator of how smart you are. It's not an indicator of how much you know about the content that you cover in your classes. It only is a test of how well you know strategies to answer these questions, and you're compared only to the students who took the same test that you did on the same day, because each test is different. And again, for the same reasons, they have to make them different. So last thing here, national merit. And again, it's a little bit confusing. Don't worry about this too much, but just know that when you receive your official scores from the national merit, the PSAT scores, you should always ask for your counselors or someone at New Mexico MESA. If you guys do some translation or some filtration of understanding of how these scores break out, we're happy to do it. This is what we do. But we always like to tell students, get some help deciphering what your score is, because it can mean a lot of things for you. It can mean national merit consideration. It can mean scholarship and financial aid. It can mean that some doors will be open for you at colleges and universities that maybe you're not even considering, that will give you additional financial aid and scholarships because of your score, even if it's just a PSAT score for now. Those things are considered by colleges and universities, but it needs to be something that's driven by you as a student. So again, when we tell you we are your advocate students, and when the adults who are working with you, I'm sure they're going to tell you they're your advocates. They're the people who are going to help you figure a lot of these things out. So please don't be shy. Please ask, even questions that you think maybe don't make sense in your own mind. They probably don't make sense for you because they're not supposed to make sense for you. So that's why we're here. That's why the other adults are in your lives, to help you understand and figure out some of these things that, like this discussion about PSAT scores, it's meant to be confusing for you. That's what they designed it to do. So, as I said before, you guys probably heard what I said. You probably heard me say a bunch of words, something about numbers, something about scores and ranges and how they're calculated. Probably sounded like blah, 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 blah. And then, is that correct? Yeah, it's correct. That's what it comes out to be. So just please remember that as you're considering not just the PSAT, but also the SAT. There's a lot of confusing information about the test. Ask somebody for clarification. Ask us, call us, let me know. I'm in Texas. I'll be in New Mexico. I actually was in New Mexico about 2 months ago for a conference in Albuquerque, and spent some time there and in Santa Fe working with the different school districts, and met with the PED people as well. So had some great conversations about a lot of things that we're covering tonight. And so don't hesitate. You can go to our website, and I would recommend, actually, if you have a chance to go to our website, you can register as a student. I will tell you, when you register as a student, we're not going to share your information. You're going to see that on the screen. I will also recommend to you that because you're registering for our website online, just like any other companies, you probably will receive some email. So you have an option to select out of receiving email. Please select out, because the company will send you information. My 15-year-old son, when he registered, I asked him to deselect so that he doesn't get all of that information. I tell people, deselect out of that, opt out of it. And if you have questions, reach out to us. That's when we can get you the information. Otherwise, you're just going to get inundated. So I don't like for that to happen, but that's a company decision that is above my head. So anyway, you hear it from me. Let me ask you guys, and let me see how much time we have. I think we have about 15 minutes. Is that right, Anita?
Yeah, I think between 7 to 7:15. So 15 to 30 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So if it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and shift gears a little bit. And let me change screens, because I do want to show you guys a little bit of the website so you can see exactly when I talk about some of the things that are available there. Let me just pull that up really quickly here. Make sure I grab the right screen. and I should be able to pull up. Do you guys see the Princeton Review website? Anita, do you see that? Our 40th
Yes,
anniversary?
we do.
Okay,
Yes.
excellent. Thank you. So this is what it looks like. And again, we're celebrating our 40th year this year. I've been with the company for half of those years. I've been here for 20 years. It's crazy. But I am going to point out to you guys, you need to pay attention to what it says right here, because this is for real. We are giving away $40,000 in scholarship money, and that's going to be applied to 4 different students. They're not each going to get 40,000. They're each going to get $10,000. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to, basically, you just have to submit an application with basic information. But you do, if you're under 18, obviously, you do have to submit with your parents' permission, or with your, if you're living with an uncle, some adult has to give permission for you to register. And so if you go to our website, you're going to see all of the information highlighted here. And I'm doing this because I do encourage you guys to submit the application, because you don't have a chance to win if you don't submit the application. And so there's going to be 4 grand prizes, each $10,000. There's no purchase required. I promise you that's true. The entry period ends the last day of the year here at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So that's what 10:59? No, 9:59, I think, your time. So the winner will be selected on the 10th of the new year. And so here's, I just want to show you guys, there's additional information that you can get. The rules about registering and all of that is right there. Please read that if you get into this, but it's really just submitting your information one time. That's the only time that you can submit it, and hopefully you will get selected. I would be extremely happy to know that somebody from New Mexico actually is one of the recipients. So I hope that happens, and I will say a special prayer for you guys so that you guys get in there. So I do want to go into an area here on the website where you can explore, and you can very easily, you don't have to register. So let me just say, if you want to register, you can go here and sign up for the Princeton Review website, and it gives you access to a lot of information. But if you don't, that's fine. You can still go to the website and explore, and you can see here, let me see if I can move the screen a little bit, because I am seeing my Zoom menu is in the way. So let me move this a little bit here. So again, when we go to explore schools, you can go to search for schools. You can look at rankings and ratings. You can look, you can do a search based on majors or careers. And you have some additional information about college admissions and counseling. You have some access to some videos there, some articles, as well as if you want to get into specific information about med school, if that's something you're considering, it's all right there. But I always like to take students to this area that says search for schools. Find colleges, you can find specific business schools, grad schools, med schools, law schools. Like, you can do a really in-depth search. I'm just going to go to search schools and find colleges. So this takes us here. So again, and let me actually move this up a little bit and try this again. All right. So hopefully you guys can still see where it says find your dream school. If you can't, please let me know. So you can do a search for schools here. Let's see, I'm just going to type in New Mexico and see what comes up. So you can see right off the bat, we've got New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, New Mexico State University, ENMU, Santa Fe University of Art and Design, UNM, University of Southwest, Central New Mexico Community College. I'm just going to pick one of these. Let's say, I'm going to go New Mexico State University. We're going to say search. So any school that you search will come up like this. This is our website. We're using information. We have agreements with all of the universities and colleges in the country. So we get all of this information from them so that you can have it in one place. You can do your search right from here. It's going to give you a lot of information. And right off the bat here, you can look at what requirements they have for the SAT, or if you take the ACT, you can see 480 to 580 on the SAT, evidence-based reading and writing, and 470 to 570 on the SAT math. And if you take the the ACT, it's all right there as well. You can see a breakdown of many things. You guys are aware of your GPA, so you can see sort of what the GPA breakdown is there. Applicants, total applicants for this past year, 13,647. The acceptance rate was 63% of those students. So basically 6 out of every 10 students was accepted. So that's not a bad acceptance rate. Average high school GPA was 3.54. So it gives you a lot of information. You can look at academic information as well. Oh, you know what? I clicked on the wrong button here. Let me just get out of this one. Let's see if it's going to let me. Let's go back a little bit. Here we go. Let me do that again. Sorry, guys. I was too quick on typing here or clicking. I'll pull up the website again. So again, if you click on any of the tabs, it'll give you information about, well, it's doing this again. And I'm not sure why. I apologize. This time I'm not going to do that. Let me just go into the university website so you can see the kind of information that you're going to get. What I want to point out here is if you are registered with the Princeton Review website, and I'm using actually my son's registration, that might be why that's happening. So my son has an assignment from me. Like I work for the company, so he has to do this routinely. We're looking at schools. Actually, right now he's a sophomore, so we're looking at programs now. But you can save every school that you search for by just going into this area here, and it will save all of the schools to your particular registration or your profile. And that's, you know, all of the information that pertains to the universities that you search for here will be saved. I don't know if any questions are popping up, Anita, but I'm going to continue here because I also want to point out to the students that as you're in the website, you're going to find information all over the screen. So please, when you're looking through even researching your colleges and universities, look for the articles and videos that we highlight around the particular information that you found. So for example, what is a good SAT score? That's pertinent to what we're talking about now. So I can look at that now. I can actually go to a video that gives me additional information. This breaks down scores and what that means, the importance of a baseline, comparison of your score versus a national average, your score versus specific target scores for typical schools. And so again, we give you a lot of information here beyond just what you're exploring with your colleges and universities. I also want to show you where you can actually search for majors and careers. This is one of my favorite areas of the website because you can actually just go straight to this area to find careers or majors. And for example, if I know that I want to go into, let's say, an engineering program, maybe get more specifically and get into maybe a, let's see, how about material science? Well, I don't know. Let's see, New Mexico. Mineral engineering. Let's see what we find there. This is going to pull up a quick overview of that major, but it's also going to point out some selected schools. And again, it's going to give you some information, really good information about different kinds of schools that you can actually go right to their websites from here. So you can see right here, for example, University of Arizona in Tucson, the average, the tuition rate you're looking at for this current year, about $33,000. Average SAT score, 1220. And it's a university kind of big, it's 36,000 total student enrollment. But you can also see, for example, in Golden, Colorado, the Colorado School of Mines, small university, but guess what? It's a little bit more expensive even than U of A, University of Arizona. But you can see the SAT score, a little bit higher requirement. And you can see here, one of the secrets is that it's a small university. So it's competitive to get into this university because there are a smaller number of students. And that's something to pay attention to as well when you're looking at the universities that you might want to apply to. There are what we call aptitude tests that are available online as well. And that kind of test is going to help you understand. One of the things it's going to help you understand is not just what you're geared for in terms of what kind of career perhaps you might be doing better in, but it's also going to help you identify whether you want to attend a university that's larger or smaller. And you guys may already know that, so you don't need a test to do that, but it's the kind of information you're going to get from these tests. I like to tell students as well, if you're a student athlete, one of the other advantages to taking not just the SAT, but sometimes also the ACT, either one, the score that you get on your SAT is also going to impact you if you're a student athlete. Obviously, if you're a student athlete that's pursuing programs that are tied to a particular sport, and maybe you're getting recruited by a university, getting a higher score on your SAT is going to make you more attractive to that school, and they're definitely going to throw more financial aid and scholarship money at you because of that. So again, we're just going to continue to encourage you to try to do better on the SAT. Prepare yourself, find find the services that will prepare you, that will help you practice, whether it's something online or something in person. You can go to a bookstore and buy a book. You can go to your libraries and actually check out some of these books. Some of them will be our books. So please look for Princeton Review material, because I promise you it will help you. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to show you guys, when you get into rankings, let's say, for example, you just want to look at rankings of colleges and universities. This is one of the books, Anita, that I'm going to be sending you. It's called the best of. We just call it the best of because the number 387 every year changes. And so this is a book that shows 100% of the contents of this book is data related to universities and students who attend the universities. So, for example, we will actually list the best schools for technology access, the campuses that are best wired, for example, that have the best Wi-Fi networks, that have the best use of technology for programs. So some of these schools, for example, some colleges and universities will use only ebooks. They don't require students to carry physical books anymore. We rank the schools for that. We rank the schools for the best green campuses that practice the best green technology, those types of things. So you'll see those rankings spelled out in this book, for example. But you're going to see, again, additional information here. So, for example, we listed some of the rankings here. Academics and administration, top 10 lists. Great career services, classroom experience, college library, financial aid. That's one I'm interested in, so I'm going to go there. And here you go. The top 10 schools are listed right away. Boydoin College, California Institute, Claremont. You can go all the way down the list. You can actually click on the university to get the information about that specific university, and then you can save that school to your profile. If it's something that you want to pursue, you want to get more information about. And again, some of these are featured, so you're going to see that there's a banner there. And I like to show students this information because, again, yes, you're going to see the Stanfords, you're going to see the UCLAs, you're going to see the Ivy League schools, but guess what? I've never heard of Thomas Aquinas College, possibly. As a student, that's maybe not a school that I had considered, but it did pop up here. So I'm going to explore it. I'm going to go look at it. And if it's, if it's a smaller school, maybe that's something I'm more interested in. Maybe it offers better scholarship, financial aid opportunities. It's not a featured school, but it did come up here. So it's something that I need to pay attention to. I can save it to my profile. I can always go back to it to explore and get more information about it. Likewise with the rest of these other schools. Okay. And there's a couple of screens here that we can go to. So lots of information for you guys to explore. Again, if you're thinking about demographics, you can click the drop down there. You can get comparisons about diversity of campuses type of information. If you're interested in extracurricular, athletic facilities, if you're a theater student, you can really get into the nuts and bolts, the details about some of these programs and why they were called out in our book. Quality of life is really important. We talk to students a lot about, do you want to be on a big campus? Do you want to be on a smaller campus? Do you want to have to take a bus from building to building to get to classes? Or do you want to know that you can walk 5 to 10 minutes and be at your building to go to class any time of the day? Those are important things to ask. Do you want to be in a cold climate? Do you mind being in the Northeast where it's going to be really icy and cold for part of the school year? Or do you want to stay in a climate that's more like home in New Mexico where maybe it's more dry? It does get cold, but maybe it doesn't get iced and snowed like it does in the Northeast. So those are kind of information that you're going to find in these lists that are really, really helpful for you as you consider. But please know that the bottom line with the information that you're going to get here is that it's all coming from students who are already at these colleges and universities. This is not data that we get from the president of the university or from the officers of the university. All of the data that we get to rank these schools comes 100% from students who are attending these colleges and universities. Okay? So, Anita, at this point, I'll stop and see if there's any questions. If anybody wants to unmute and just make this a discussion, question and answer period, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
So if anyone has any questions, they're more than welcome to type them in the chat, or they can unmute themselves as they'd like.
Mm-hmm. Anita, what is the follow-up after this conference for the students? Is there anything that they will be doing sort of as follow-up?
Well, so within MESA, we will support, I guess the best follow-up is, through their schools, through their school counselors, as they prepare for the test. There's also some information with the SAT being a required test. I believe the schools will be going into a test prep session, or, they're getting ready for the standardized test to happen this spring.
Mhm.
So we'll see how that works with regards to the SAT.
Okay.
After this conference, all of our sessions are going to be recorded and sent out just as resource material, as well as any, links to anything, slides, etc., for all of our students to use, in perpetuity on our sites there.
Excellent.
But there was one question that came through, and
Okay.
it was, is the scholarship giveaway for all students in high school or just seniors?
It's for all students under the age of 18.
And then there was a second question, maybe I missed this. When is the SAT offered?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
When is the SAT offered? So
Oh,
maybe
great
something
question.
on test dates?
Yeah, so you can always go to College Board, and I can show you just really quickly. If you can still see my screen, I'm just going to literally type in SAT exam dates 2021, and we're actually at the end of 21, so I'm going to say 2022. If you do a search for that, upcoming test dates, I'm not going to click on anything that says add. I'm going to go here. This is college readiness. You always want to look at these different companies who are cited here. You can just go to College Board directly if you want, but I always tell students there's College Board right there. You can go directly to their website, but you also want to check what these other websites would say as well. And I'm just going to go here. This is a College Board website, and you can see that all the test dates here are outlined here. So in New Mexico, I don't know if you guys work with College Board. I imagine you do, to do what's called the school day SAT. And what that means is that College Board works it out with your specific school district to determine a date, usually in the spring, for them to come out and test all of the juniors. That's the way it works in Texas. College Board works with all of our school districts here. And so, for example, my son had a date in September when they took the PSAT for his sophomore class. And that same date was the date that College Board was testing all of the juniors on the SAT. I'm sorry, on the PSAT. So they have a similar date in the spring for the students in the school district. So even if your school district does offer that school day SAT, you can go to the website and see the different dates that are available for taking the SAT. And you'll want to keep an eye on obviously the date on which that test will be administered, but you also want to be able to know when the deadline is for registration. So you can see on the very last column, deadline for changes, and the next column, late registration deadline. But the important one is right here next to us, is deadline registration. So, for example, if you're planning, and I'm going to scoot down a little bit because we're, in December, obviously. So if you're looking at the March 12th administration, you can register now. And the deadline for that test is February 11th. There is what's called a late registration deadline that what they do is they give you a couple of additional deadlines, but there's a fee for late registration deadline. So you want to keep an eye on that. The important column is this first column, which says registration deadline. Here's what you want to pay attention to. So for example, for the March exam, it's February 11th. But you can register right from here. And again, don't register here if your school is already providing you a test administration school day version of it. Because when you register here on the College Board website, you're actually going to be asked to pay for it. And it's $53. Any other questions?
And well, specifically here for New Mexico, you mentioned the school day being that it's one of our tests. I looked up on our PED website, and it looks like testing will consist of a 5-day testing window. And so it's for all juniors in April. So if your school will be giving it to April 13th to 15th and 19th to 20th. So
Okay.
with makeup days later April. So whatever I guess your district has decided for your school day, but all will be given in April for that testing.
That's excellent information. The only additional points I would make to those windows of preparation, actually the windows for taking the test for the juniors, is our recommendation for preparing for the exam is to give yourself, so look at the target test date. All right, so if you know that window is in April, let's just say April 1, for example, take that target test date on your calendar and mark it with a pen or a marker, and then work backwards from that from 1 month to 3 months to prepare for that exam. So again, if you're thinking about a practice test, figure out which score you need based on which colleges and universities you're considering. And then if you take that first practice test, let's say in January, you want to get started as soon as possible, obviously. So in January, if you take your first practice test, then you'll have a score to consider and to determine if you scored like a 900, if you score 1,000, which is like the national average, then you know that you're going to need, a couple or 300 points, depending on where you're looking to apply. Then you need to give yourself enough time in that 3-month period to prep for that exam, for the official exam. And so you give yourself time to take 1, 2, 3, maybe practice tests in that time frame. And that gives you an opportunity to, practice with certain strategies, either through our website or other websites or information that your school counselors or teachers give you. But take advantage of whatever they give you and ask a lot of questions. That's our recommendation.
Okay, there's another question is, do you have to pick schools when you sign up for the SAT, or can you send scores after you get them?
Great question. And no, you don't have to select schools when you take the SAT. If you don't know, or even leave it on purpose, you can leave it blank on purpose. You don't have to select schools at the time that you take the SAT. That's a great question.
And you may have answered around it, but do you take the SAT as a junior or senior?
We recommend taking it as a junior, because if you need to, so let's just say you take it as a junior and you don't score the score that you need to get in the school you're trying to get into, you give yourself time to take another SAT, an official SAT. But you also give yourself time to practice and take 1 or 2 more practice tests if you need to. It all really depends on what score you're targeting and how much time you have. So we recommend take it as a junior. If you score the score you want as a junior, then you've got your score. If you don't, you give yourself time to even take it as a senior again, if you need to still improve your score.
And I did post in the chat the fact sheet, the school day fact sheet from New Mexico PED. So if you guys want to pull that up and kind of save that link.
Excellent.
But while anyone else may be thinking of questions, I did go ahead and put in the chat the attendance link for tonight. So go ahead and click on that to go ahead and make sure you complete that before you leave tonight. But we still have a couple more minutes if anyone has any last questions. Well, if no less questions, we'll go ahead and end out the session. There's a comment, Raider Power. So I guess you're a Texas Tech. Someone,
Okay.
so another student may be interested in Texas Tech.
Guns up.
I'm gonna have
Guns
to throw in my gig'em in there for my A&M.
Of course.
But that's
I was
okay.
waiting for that, Anita. I was waiting. I said Texas Tech a few times. I did that on purpose, but you were
Yes.
really good. Thank you.
But so thank you all for coming. Again, this session will be recorded for future reference to report back to you. But thank you so much for your time for tonight. Let me go ahead and stop our recording.